Good morning, folks. We have some new information about changes in the solar system, plus we could always use a review. Venus is the story today, so let's start from the outside and come in. Uranus has been photographed by Hubble since its inception, but until recently was not able to see the auroras out there. Must have been quite a show. Saturn, god of the harvest, saw stormier skies than usual. Storm predictably comes every 30 years and lasts a few dozen days, but the most recent event started a decade early and lasted over 200 days. NASA's observations also indicate Saturn's rotation is slowing. They think it's their measurement error. Right. After 50 years of careful observation of Jovian radio emissions, Zeus now whistles in a different octave. The visual scape of Jupiter changed dramatically from the chemistry to the energetic events. I call this storms and stripes. Then the alleged asteroid impact last year. Thing is, they admit to seeing no debris in the clouds from the explosion, but also no cloud hole punch in case it somehow had remained intact. The concentric circles are my favorite part. I never discussed that. Mars has apparently taken some magnificent quakes recently. Interesting trick for a planet they said had no tectonics. Most of you know that slowing of Venus's rotation is not disputed, but now we have further evidence of changes there. Over the last 6 years, the weather on Venus has been becoming more and more extreme. Now consider everything you have seen, and then how lucky Earth is to have not changed to those extremes. Now let's jump back in time to revisit some of the Earth changes we are experiencing. Earth's poles are shifting, magnetic poles that is. For simplicity, I've labeled the top, bottom two, and middle point of official North Pole measurements. The first 73 years at the bottom represent normal pole migration, but the next 68 years, up to 1972, shows a large jump. A similar migration is taken to the top, 2001, but this took only 29 years. We know that as of a few years ago, it was traveling 40 miles a year towards Siberia. Globally, our protective magnetic shield is 10% weaker than it was in the 19th century, and the World Center for Geomagnetism claims the weakening began in the 1600s. That's Earth's protective interface with energy from space. 10% gone. 10% more energy coming in. Not just the extra solar energy they measure, but on all wavelengths and frequencies, not to mention the cosmic ray and gamma ray bursts not coming from the sun. Never found a climate scientist considering this fact in their findings. Observers here know that the rare polar phenomenon known as noctilucent clouds has recently become a normal sight at mid-latitudes in summer, or that the boring F1 layer critical frequency that boringly tracks with the solar cycle decided to go nuts in 2007, indicating a serious energy change. As regular observers know, heat records are no joke. They're here, but precipitation trumps them all. Cold is at the heels of heat and is actually winning the race in the United States in 2013, and might want to ask Europe and India about the end of 2011. Compounding the weather changes is a collapsing atmosphere. NASA's confusion about the drop confuses me. They explain that solar flares expand our atmosphere and that the lack of flares during solar minimum makes it collapse. They claim this recent drop was too large and must be due to global warming. Meanwhile, they'd spent the last few years gawking at how long the solar minimum was lasting and how record low it had gone. The factor that they claim collapses the atmosphere was major in two ways, according to NASA, and both these videos explain it well and show their sources. Since the coronal hole anomalies in 2007, we have had fewer sunspots, even as we are supposed to be getting into solar maximum, and less Earth-directed flaring from those spots, not meeting their magnetic classification, and almost every major flare has been on the limb, CMEs favoring the backside as well. So why is the sun lacking in power? Where's the sun's energy? I might submit there's evidence to suggest we should hypothesize a general energy shift to the planets. What you are seeing is while the planets have been acting up, the strength of the sun's polar fields is fading. What you are seeing is not a plot of sunspots, and it is not a plot of flaring strength, but a slow, steady decline of solar magnetism over decades. You know what happens when magnetic fields of the sun are absent. We get coronal holes, Alphen waves, and better energy transfer from the sun to the planets, at least according to NASA. Let me remind you that humans have once before witnessed such a sunspot shyness towards Earth. It occurred during the Maunder minimum, the greatest observed solar shutdown. Earth's shield is fading. The entire system is on the fritz. No climate scientist seems to care. And again, if they make you think it's your fault, it's a lot easier to usher in Agenda 21 now, isn't it? I'll open that can of worms later. Eyes open. No fear. Be safe, everyone, and I guess I'll tack the news onto the end of this. Hope that was helpful. Rumbia got done with the Philippines, now headed across the South China Sea to Hong Kong. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, tropical storm is forming off the Mexico coastline and will nudge northward before swinging out to sea. Other top watch tonight is in the USA. Actually, this U shape of storm potential actually stretches from Canada down into Mexico and is driven by this massive cooler air rushing south. Where it meets any significant heat and moisture along the convergence line, they will equalize and everyone on the ground below it will know it. Sunspots actually got some development up north with larger yet still separated umbras. Got some trailing development exiting the southwest, and the new guys on the limb could use a pick-me-up. This is the solar wind from 2 days ago. You remember how simultaneous the speed, density, and plasma temperature spikes occur when CMEs arrive. Well, yesterday we saw density rising first, and then speed and plasma appeared to start rising, and what do you know? Yesterday we saw the density falling all day, speed continued to rise all day, and actually might not be done yet. That's the non-simultaneous impact of a coronal hole stream rather than a CME. Always remember, it's the density spikes that jab our magnetic field, so disturbance is waning as density falls. Canadian magnetometers indicating the same. Still got some energetic flux as we await the CME from a few days ago, the one Tony Phillips and NOAA agree will hit the Earth tonight. Probably also need to monitor the umbral fields. They remain closed, but with energy arriving at Earth and coronal hole factors about to be elevated, we just have to watch and wait for the opening. Only 2 5-pointers in the last 24 hours. Close call as well, again near Antarctica. Now let me show you the last 2 weeks of earthquakes, looking only for 6 magnitude and higher. The lone hit was a 6.4 in the Atlantic the same day that transequatorial coronal hole faced Earth. And as we await the new ones, prominently up north, remember that the last one was not a full watch because there were not energetic factors, just the coronal hole. Well, here comes some more. We got shots of our eastern limb and southern limb. You'll see why. First one in 171 angstroms reveals too much S-curve in the largest yellow magnetic loop. Might pop. Eyes open. No fear. It's 6:15 a.m. Eastern Time, and that's the news. Be safe, everyone.